Hi everybody, it's Marissa here from Rise High, and today I am joined with Emma Slate, who is the CEO of Turner Real Estate. And what we thought we'd do today is a really special live where we're actually going to talk about property. Obviously property's been a really hot topic over the last few months with the coronavirus, and there's been a lot of impacts on tenants, there's been a lot of impacts on landlords. There's obviously been economic impacts which we're working through and we still don't really know the full extent of. So I thought that I would invite Emma in to give a real in-depth look at what is actually happening for renters, for tenants, what's happening for landlords, what the future of the property market might look like for both of these groups, and really hoping to drill deep into that today with Emma. So thanks for joining us, Emma.
No, thanks for the invitation, Marissa. Great to be here.
Yeah, and as always, we're obviously going live today because we'd love your comments and questions as we go. So please feel free to put the comments or questions in the comment section below, or please send them through to emily@risehigh.com.au if you'd like them to be anonymous. So I reckon we'll get stuck into it. There's so much to talk about. We've got limited time, so let's get into it. I mean, just generally, how have you found the market at Turner? Like from a general perspective, how has it all sort of been over the last few months?
Yeah, we've had quite two different experiences, I think. We've got a team of 12 salespeople that work right across Adelaide, and we manage about 2,700 properties, so a large property management agency. So my property management team have had some pretty long days and pretty long nights, I've got to say, particularly when things first started to hit, and salespeople had some pretty quiet days in those early times as well. But what we've seen relatively quickly in Adelaide, I think, is the affordability of property, both in sales and rentals, has been a really key factor to people being able to nearly be okay. Yeah. So whilst some people have definitely experienced some hardship in paying their rent, we've been able to manage that pretty well. So, we've got, we originally had just over 100 people on some sort of agreement with their landlords.
Okay, so as a result of the coronavirus.
Yeah. And of course we asked them.
That's pretty, I mean, that's a pretty low ratio, 100 tenants out of 2,700.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a low ratio, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's what we were really concerned about, how much we might get and where the requests would come from and whether they were legitimate. So we set up a pretty robust system that people had to prove that they had had their job cut or reduced, and we then had something to be able to go and talk to the landlords about, and of course some landlords have lost their jobs as well and still experiencing that hardship. So managing that tension was pretty tight, but for some people that said perhaps give them a $50 a week reduction, we said let's do that for 8 weeks and have a review of that.
Yeah.
And so we're sort of already past that first review point, and quite a few tenants have been able to say, I really appreciate how good the landlord's been, I'm back working again, all is well.
Yeah.
And for some people where we negotiated a deferment so that rent was still going to be payable in the future, they've actually been able to keep up with their rental payments.
Oh, great.
So we're finding that our arrears are, of course, a little higher than normal.
Yeah.
But probably it's that core group of 100 to 150 that our property managers are working with and know.
Yeah.
Of course, people that have always been bad payers, we've just been able to go straight back to them and say, look, how have you been affected by COVID? And this is a problem before, so we can't just use that as an excuse either.
Have you found that, like you said, that you put a process in place to make sure that the tenant's request was legitimate, and that's really important, I think. So, I mean, did you come across requests that weren't legitimate? Like, were there tenants that were trying to take advantage of the situation?
Oh, yes, there were a couple.
Yeah.
There were a couple, but I suppose we found it annoying that perhaps so much of the media focused on that.
Yeah.
Because likewise, we had people and owners of business that are a husband and wife team. Yeah. And sort of suddenly their income's gone. So, you just felt that perhaps the media were being a little unfair to people who were legitimately struggling.
That's been the hard thing during this period, is that there's people that actually legitimately are finding it tough and really need access to some of the government relief that's being put out there. And there's other people that potentially are taking advantage of certain situations. So it's good that you put the process in place to make sure that the claims were legitimate and make sure that it was all done properly.
Yeah, and if there was a deferred rental plan, we had a property lawyer pretty early on that did us an agreement, so we use that as the template. So if we need to take that to the tribunal at a later stage, and we're still letting them know in a friendly way of what that outstanding arrears is.
But
it still is outstanding.
But based on what you're saying, it sounds like you're pretty hopeful and positive that things will return to a normal, sort of arrears level and a normal level in the near future.
I think by the end of the year we will definitely be really seeing some of that correct. And so I think again the affordability angle, so people getting JobKeeper or job seeker, has been able to keep in that range. Maybe some of the executive properties it's been harder. But for most investors the impact has been, I think, well managed in Adelaide.
Yeah, awesome. We are pretty lucky in Adelaide. I think the impact's been quite low, not only from the economic perspective but also the health aspect. So it's really nice to see that things are starting to return to normal. We're certainly seeing that in property, like you said. A few shout outs before we go on. Hi Saneth, hi Emily, hi James, Twee, Billy, Andrew, Rue, Igor. Thanks for joining us, guys. Really appreciate you tuning in. If you've got any questions or comments, please comment below. Okay, let's move forward. I really want to examine what you think the short, medium and long-term impacts will be of what's happened in the last couple of months, because the last couple of months has felt like a long time for many people, but it really was quite short in the scheme of things. But what do we think the impacts are going to be, the flow-on effects from this? Are you seeing?
I mean, probably one of the observations that we've seen, again, just focusing on rentals at this moment, and we can talk about sales in a moment, is that a lot of tenants and landlords are keen to renew that current tenancy in place.
Yes.
So I think there's probably a bit of...
To have a guaranteed tenant. Not wanting to have vacancy.
And also the tenants haven't been too keen to rush out and find something new either. Of course, it was hard to view properties there for a while. And it was very time consuming to do that, but that was part of the process. But I think the tenants have also probably done their budget and know that this is what they can afford, and so now is the time to stick with that. So I think we'll probably just sort of see at some point in time a lot of people will be ready to move out of their rental property, and we might see that all at once. So we might see a bit of a spike in demand in next summer. I think will be an interesting time to watch.
You're at next summer. So, and the other thing about that is, do you think there's an impact on rent prices for that? Because like you said, many people are renewing now. Is there a rule at the moment where you can't actually increase rent right now?
There is, under the COVID emergency bill, there is, a rent freeze, I guess.
So what if you're if you're a landlord and you're renewing your tenancy now for, say, a 12-month lease, does that mean that you have to lock in at the current rent for the next 12 months, or is it possible to build in rent rises into the lease?
You can do a rent rise but we're not seeing landlords ask for it a lot, because if you say talking about $10 a week, perhaps, and that would be sort of an average of 5 to 20, depending on the property, etc., etc. But for the sake of $10 a week at the moment, compared to a tenancy changeover, a letting fee, a vacancy period, they're better having that guaranteed tenancy, and that's what we're finding people are wanting, is a bit of certainty.
So do you think that rents will stay quite stable then in the short term, medium term, and then maybe in the next 12 months we're going to start to see a bit of a catch up?
Yeah, I mean, we had seen a bit of rental increase over the last 12 months after about 7 years of pretty static rental increases. So it came at a time where things were starting to touch up a little, and I think we probably put the brakes on that a little. And I think maybe next summer being the peak rental time is when the real test will be as to whether people will pay a little bit more or whether it will just freeze on that. But I can't see things going down.
Yeah, well that's good.
And again,
positive.
looking at the number of people that have said they can't pay the rent is an important factor in me genuinely believing we're not going to see the reductions. 95% of people are still comfortable paying.
And have you seen an impact on vacancy rates?
If anything, they've become tighter.
Okay.
Just with people not moving out of properties and wanting that certainty. So
well, that's positive news. So I guess as an investor, that's really positive. We've obviously got a lot of investors tuning into this, and it's positive to know that, you know, the rental market is stable, rental prices are stable, vacancy is stable, if not potentially slightly improved, and that moving forward it's going to be a bit more positive, I think. What potentially some people were expecting.
Well, particularly when you look at stocks and the sort of vulnerability that they've experienced.
Exactly.
Property has
been a lot more stable. Yeah, that's exactly right. Hi Chrissy, hi George, hi Giselle, hi Barbara, Julian, Kristen and Penny. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate your support. Please feel free to ask any questions you like below in the comments section. Can we just move our minds to sales? Because obviously sales drives property values, and as investors, you know, the people tuning in who are investors will be keen to know what impact this might have from a property value perspective. And I thought you're at the forefront at Turner, you know, one of the biggest agencies in Adelaide, so really keen to hear what you're thinking the market might look like and what this might do to property values in the future.
There's probably a couple of sectors to really look at in that. I mean, in the first few days we had people that were preparing to sell kind of bring up and say, I'm not doing it, it's too much uncertainty in the market, and we understood that. So there was sort of that initial panic, and some people, you know, are now talking to us about putting the property on the market in a few months. So that definitely caused a bit of shortage of stock. And us and I know other agencies around Adelaide have actually found buyers that are quite hungry, because there's many people that, you know, have already sold their property and ready to upgrade, so they were wanting a home. So there's still been some off-market sales happening, and we've found demand has been strong. Every contract that we have signed since COVID, we've seen at a good market value, because the stock has been low. As far as sort of more units, portfolio top-ups go, is for investors, that market has been a lot quieter.
So, but perhaps like homeowners are still out there shopping.
Absolutely.
Investors might have dropped off a little bit. But I think, you know, from what we're seeing on our side of the fence, I feel like investors will gain their confidence back up really quickly.
I think so
to get back in. I think there's been a period of pause whilst people were trying to work out what was going to be the impact of this. But now that we know that it's not actually as bad as what we originally thought it would be, I think people will get back in the game. I mean, interest rates are at historical lows.
Exactly.
Rental returns are fantastic. So, you know, fundamentally, investing in property in SA makes sense.
Yeah, and property is one of those, you know, industries that there's always demand. People are always going to, unfortunately, you know, they may have divorce, so that drives that. People love expanding their families, and that the home isn't big enough. There's all those factors that keep the market ticking over. So, you know, whilst certainly it's been a tough few months, we're certainly sympathetic to hospitality and travel, which haven't had any gear to work with. At least we've been second or third.
That's right.
You know, trying to get away.
Are you seeing any trends about the types of property that are in hot demand?
Definitely family homes.
From a rental, but also from a sales perspective. You say family homes?
Yeah, in both markets.
So when you say family home, are you sort of referring to, you know, like a 3-bedroom on a block with a backyard?
With a bit of space.
With a bit of space.
Yeah, definitely, and probably more so in that buyer market, probably towards the upper end, so 700 plus. So they might have sold the original family home
maybe upgrading,
and wanting the 4-bedroom home and the 2 living areas. So I think that the demand stays in there, and it's always in demand in the rental market. So.
And we've had a question come through from Gary. Thanks, Gary. Gary asked, what is the ruling of the ability to inspect my properties?
Oh, I could have a few answers to that. I'm not sure if Gary is selling, so I'll just run through the different restrictions. And so we've got some clarification. Investment. Okay, so if we had the property on the market for sale and someone was currently living there, we would make private inspections with each buyer one by one.
And do you
in
sort of do
agreement with
those
the tenant.
like in, 10 or 15 increments back to back?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No advertised times, respecting where
How
the
does that
tenants
go?
do.
Have you found
Yeah,
that
pretty
people
well.
are quite open to
Yes,
that?
yeah, because they understand why we're doing it. They see
Yeah.
it as a benefit for themselves. So if the property is vacant, we're now able to take groups of 10 through, and that's for both sales and rentals.
Okay, great.
So
10 at a time.
Yeah. So we're doing bookings of 5 because you might like to bring your partner with you, or
Yeah.
your mum, or your best friend, and we don't want to stop that process because you've got to like what you're doing, whether you're buying or renting. So we're just booking those and taking those through, and a few other things. We clean and do all that type of thing. Routine inspection. So that's an unusual one at the moment because it's fallen into the category of legislation being the COVID emergency response bill. And at the moment we're not able to conduct routines in person until those restrictions are lifted. So under law, no routine inspections face to face can be done. And that will continue until October unless the state government declare through that bill a variation to that.
So what risk does that pose to the landlord though? Because if you're not sort of doing routines during that period, there is a risk to the landlord that the tenant is perhaps not maintaining the property properly or doing something that they shouldn't be doing in the property, unfortunately. How are you managing that risk?
So we contacted landlords and let them know that we had invested in some technology where we were doing some virtual routine inspections, and we encouraged them to take up that option. So obviously that's something we're already doing for them.
Do that?
So we prepare it, and there might be from the last inspection or something that's important to the landlord. We write to them and say, hey, make sure you take a picture of this, or can you take a picture of that, or this is really important to the landlord. So there's some smarts within the inspection system that knows that the photos have been taken at the property.
Okay.
So the tenant then uploads them, we get the report back and check on those things, might get on the phone to the tenant and clarify anything we need to, and we're providing that inspection to the landlord. So is it the same as before? No.
Yeah.
But we think it's still an important step, and our answer is not just dropping routines.
Yeah.
We don't think that's the
So
right
will
thing
that
to
mean
do.
that once the restrictions get lifted or changed, that there will be a really big influx of, like you'll have to catch up on a lot of routine inspections, or how are you going to manage that process?
No, I think that generally they're on sort of set months anyway because they're done at monthly intervals, and just from a resource point of view, we would have to go back to sticking with that. So but of course those that hadn't had their March ones done first will become a priority, and then they'll fall back into the sequence.
Yeah.
And for some long-term tenants, the landlord said, hey, I know they keep the property well, it's A-OK, and we've managed it that way. But it's on an opt-out sort of basis, otherwise it's business, not as usual. But
as close as possible to
as
usual.
part of our management.
Have you found that this period has been quite stressful for some landlords? Have you found that some landlords have been quite stressed, not only by all of these changes, but also maybe their own financial impacts? Like how have you dealt with that, and what sort of advice do you have for landlords out there that are feeling a bit stressed and a bit worried about things?
Yeah, definitely. Initially, everybody was worried that tenants weren't going to pay rent, and I think initially the government flagged there was going to be some sort of measures in place, and that was an anxious time as people
I think the
waited.
announcement of the eviction moratorium
that
was
help.
really quite stressful for a lot of landlords. So I mean, I imagine that you would have been getting some phone calls and
people were sort of checking their portals every day, contacting our team, asking if tenants have paid rent. That was part of the process. And I think once a couple of weeks went by, and the majority were, people got a bit more familiar with what was going on. We said to landlords, of course, we'll let you know early, so you can have some thought about, what your position might be, because some simply weren't able to offer a rent reduction. It had to be something that was deferred later on, and we've actually been surprised how well those negotiations have gone from all parties.
Yeah, that's
because a lot of tenants have said, I never thought I'd have to ask for this. And other people, being the landlords, just said, I never thought I'd be in this position.
I think one of the good things that's come out of this time is it has shown us generally people are good. And and we have had a good level of care for each other, I think, as a community.
Yeah.
Which is probably why those negotiations have gone so smoothly.
Yeah,
for
I
you,
think
that
so. I think
there's been
so.
a genuine understanding that you know, people in better positions might be able to help out people in not so good positions. So,
yeah, and that can build a lot of trust and long-term tenancy. I can see Gary's asking about maintenance in investment properties. Yes, that can all go ahead. They would be a time that you would work out with the tenant. So if smoke alarm company would call in and say what time suits and when can I come and make that there, and if the tenant was feeling unwell or something, likewise I think the tradie would expect them to let them know as well. So definitely I think keeping the property well maintained is important for everybody. Tenants living there every day, and of course the landlord should be wanting that as well to protect their investment. So it's definitely good to see, and that actually never stopped. Most non-essential maintenance completely dried up, but we still have situations where power went out or there's flooding.
Is the non-essential maintenance coming back? Is that something that now we're starting to see that again?
It's not as strong as before, which is interesting, so I'm not sure.
Is that because the tenants aren't demanding it?
Or? Yeah, the requests aren't coming through as much.
So maybe
certainly
the tenants are being a bit more mindful of who they have in their house at the moment.
Maybe they're also thinking, the landlord might say no, they might not have the money at the moment. So it's hard to know exactly, but it is starting to get back to normal.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that answers your question, Gary. I think we asked about smoke alarm batteries and things like that, but obviously, as Emma said, that's all the same as maintenance, so you should still be able to get maintenance on your property if you are a tenant. So George has another question. Some agents seem to think that sellers might hold off because of pending rate drop. What do you think? Well, I think in answer to that, I might step in here. I think that interest rates are unlikely to drop much lower. We're at historical lows. We've got a very extremely low cash rate. The Reserve Bank has come out and said that we're at the lowest that they're going to get to. Of course, there is one more potential rate cut they could make, but the Reserve Bank have come out and said there will be no further rate cuts, and they expect the rates to stay at this level for about 3 years. So I'm not sure. Do you think sellers are holding off? Do you think
it's not something they're saying to us? There's always sort of passive buyers in the market that are sometimes just looking for that dream property and they enjoy looking at property, and then they kind of bite when they see something. But I mean, we're not experienced. We're not being run off our feet, but there's enough momentum there which seems to be holding the market.
I mean, there might be a few sellers that are just thinking that they'll just wait and see. And they might be holding off for a few months, maybe until restrictions ease further, if they're not desperately wanting to sell right now. And it'll be interesting. I think the interesting time will be, like you said, summer. Towards the end of this year and early next year, because by then we'd hope that coronavirus is a thing of the past and we don't have to talk about it anymore, and that people are back to full employment, and maybe some of the economic issues have been dealt with, and people feel comfortable just to transact as normal. Do you think that that's sort of what you're
That's our observation of what people are saying to us, when we're at opens, what people are saying to us, callbacks, and I think probably in Adelaide we may just buck that trend a bit of having enough supply and demand to keep it moving at an okay pace, rather than having the drops that sort of the higher price states are experiencing at the moment. And I guess just going back to interest rates being so low and rental yields being so good, like I said, it is a great time to buy an investment property, and we probably have quite a few viewers that are looking to buy an investment property during this period, and also some viewers are looking to maybe buy a first time investment property. So do you have any tips for those types of investors who actually want to buy an investment property now? Specifically, I want to hear your tips, but I also want to touch on insurance, because I know that landlord insurance around rent default has changed. So that's a bit of a two-part question, but I might throw over to you to see what your thoughts are on that. I mean, definitely looking around the median sort of price range of being that 400 to 500 $1,000.
That's a nice sweet spot, I think, for an investment.
Yeah, it is. And you're going to be able to get a property, not just a unit for that. So you're going to get good long-term capital growth, particularly if somebody's a little younger and they've got time for that to happen. And those types of properties are always in demand.
Yes.
So, you know, you can...
Not only by buyers, but also by tenants.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you can be fairly confident that long term that property will look after you.
Yeah.
You're also not going to be hit with your strata fees and things like that. So
you're also going to get a better rental return.
You are.
Because as you start spending more on your investment property, the rental return starts to drop off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think they're always a really good starter
properties,
and then top up your portfolio later on, perhaps with some units and things like that there. But give those first couple of properties time to get the true appreciation of the value there. So that would certainly be my tip. And often that can be the family home that they then move into a second home and keep that. That's a great option.
That is a great option. You know, that you've bought your first family home, you're living in it, then it's time to upgrade. Instead of selling, consider converting it to investment property. I think it's a really good option. So for those people who are buying a new investment property or converting a home into an investment property at the moment, there is a little bit of a sticking point with insurance because generally with your landlord's insurance you can get rent default, which means that if the tenant stops paying rent, you can actually claim that against your insurance policy. My understanding is that insurance companies aren't offering rent default at the moment.
Not quite. Different insurance companies are doing different things.
Okay.
But we are still working with a couple of providers, and one in particular that is able to offer rent default.
Oh, great.
Excluding COVID. But you know, we've already sort of talked around the numbers.
So what does that mean? I mean, how does that work?
It's business as usual, but if the rent default
is as a result of COVID,
and it was directly as a result, the insurer won't pay it. So I mean, I think now that we're sort of further along the line with this and seeing perhaps less rent default than we might have expected, or people getting back on track quicker.
Yeah, hopefully the insurance companies will actually come back to the party and offer rent default in their policies again.
Yeah, I think they were obviously just very nervous and a little oversubscribed perhaps, so understand why they had to do what they had to do. But for those existing insurance holders, that cover stands. Which I think is really important to know as well.
Have a few more shout outs. Hi Harrison, Kester, Tanya, Lee, Martin and Kelly. Thanks for joining us guys, I really appreciate it. We're going to be wrapping up soon, so if you've got any last minute questions, please flick them through on the comment section. So I guess I just want to wrap it up with some any advice or tips. We've already given so many great little nuggets of gold throughout this session, which has been great. Thanks for joining us again, Emma.
That's okay.
But I really want to leave everyone with a bit of a positive note of where the property market's heading and what they should look forward to. So any last sort of comments or tips around that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just going back to that stability of housing, I think is a real positive. So people are feeling nervous as an investor. Although, you know, there's been a few bumps in the road, the majority has held tight in property. And
absolutely.
We can show that even going back to GFC days. And
absolutely.
As well.
And you normally find that in times of great volatility, like we're just experiencing right now, where the share market is just going a bit crazy, investors actually transfer from shares to property, which also has a role to play in helping to solidify the property values and even grow the property values. So I'm sure that that's going to be an outcome of this as well.
Definitely, and I think as property management companies, we've really justified, you know, our work to investors as well. Like, you know, there's been many long days and long nights with hard conversations, and that is our role. You know,
absolutely.
And that's what I've said to the team, you're doing a great job, but that is our role.
I just actually feel like anyone who owns an investment property and doesn't have a property manager is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Because it is a property management's a really hard job. And as a property, it's a really hard job. And I know that you guys do a fantastic job, but it's really hard work. So for someone who's trying to manage their own investment property, it's really a shame because that could put them off from growing their portfolio further.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if they sort of outsource that property management side, it can really help them to make it a lot less stress, a lot lower maintenance.
And you know,
Yeah.
we feel comfortable in showing them how we can save them that money, because we touched on insurance. I doubt that an insurer will offer insurance to a private landlord now.
Absolutely.
So they're going through that property management channels because their books show that gets a better outcome and that manages a better tenancy, which is of course more money in your pocket.
And insurance is so important.
And we get such cheaper rates. You know, we've seen landlords come to us who are self-managing and they're paying $600 for something we can offer a policy for at $265.
Oh wow.
Because you're risk rated by the insurer.
Yeah.
So I think things like that are important to understand in the value of property management as well.
Yeah. So I think overall, hopefully we've left you with some comfort that the property market is strong and will remain strong in the future. So definitely good news ahead, I think, for the property market.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your insight today. It was really great having you here.
No, thank you.
And hopefully, thanks for all of your questions as well, guys. If you've got any more, of course, you can send them through as we go. But we will touch base with you again soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye for now.
See you later.